Welcome to Midnight Mystic Stories. I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow and helps us keep bringing more of the content you love. And be sure to comment below where you are tuning in from. Thank you and enjoy the video. I had always been the type of person who believed in the idea of fate, especially when it came to love. So, when I decided to try out a dating app called Hinge, I thought I was just giving destiny a little nudge. The day I signed up, my heart raced with excitement. I picked out my best pictures, wrote an engaging bio, and swiped right on a few promising profiles. I was ready to find something real. But what I stumbled into was anything but. After a week of casual chats that fizzled out faster than I could keep track of, I matched with someone named Jake. He had this brooding look in his profile picture, dark curls framing a face that hinted at mischief. His messages were clever, laced with a dark humor that piqued my interest. He seemed different, not like the typical guys I had encountered. There was a spark, a magnetic pull that made me feel giddy and nervous at the same time. We decided to meet up, and I chose a cozy little cafe tucked away in a quiet corner of town. It had that rustic charm that made you feel instantly at home, with warm lighting and the rich aroma of coffee wafting through the air. As I sat at table, my heart raced with anticipation. I scanned the entrance, hoping to spot him. When he finally walked in, I felt a mix of excitement and dread. He was even more striking in person, his presence demanding attention. Our conversation flowed easily, and I found myself drawn to the way he spoke, his deep voice wrapping around each word like a warm blanket. But there was something unsettling beneath the surface. Occasionally, he would glance at me with an intensity that made me feel like he was peering into my very soul. It sent a chill down my spine, but I brushed it off as nerves. Maybe I was just overthinking things. As the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He talked about his family in a way that seemed strangely detached, and I noticed a flicker of something dark in his eyes when he spoke of his past. Every now and then, he would ask me questions that felt probing, like he wanted to dig into the depths of my mind. I found myself sharing things I wouldn't normally tell a stranger, caught in the web of his charm and intensity. We decided to take a walk after finishing our coffees. The streets were dimly lit, with shadows dancing along the pavement. A sense of unease crept in as we wandered deeper into the quieter parts of town. The air felt heavy, as if something was lurking just out of sight. I tried to shake off the feeling, convincing myself that it was just the atmosphere. But then he turned to me, his expression serious and intense. He shared stories about his childhood, tales of isolation and a family that never understood him. The weight of his words pressed down on me, and I felt a strange compulsion to comfort him. But there was also a nagging feeling in the back of my mind, a voice whispering that I should be careful. The shadows seemed to deepen around us, the silence of the night amplifying the tension. After a while, he suggested we head to his place. In hindsight, I should have said no. I should have trusted my instincts. But I was caught up in the moment, the thrill of the unknown pulling me along like a moth to a flame. He lived in an old apartment complex on the edge of town, the kind that had seen better days. The building loomed over us, its cracked facade and peeling paint sending a shiver down my spine. As we stepped inside, the air felt different, stale and heavy. The dim light flickered as we climbed the narrow staircase, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into a trap. His apartment was sparsely decorated, the walls bare except for a few dark paintings that seemed to absorb the light. A chill ran through me as I glanced at them, the images twisted and unsettling. We settled onto the worn-out couch, and he poured us both a drink. I sipped mine cautiously, trying to mask my unease. The conversation took a darker turn as he began to talk about his interests. At first, it was intriguing, but soon it morphed into something sinister. He spoke of human behavior, of the darkness that lurked within people, and I could feel my heart racing as I realized the depths of his obsession. The more he spoke, the more I felt trapped, as if I was being drawn into his twisted reality. My mind raced as I tried to think of an escape. I needed to leave, but I didn't want to provoke him. I could see the flicker of something dangerous in his eyes, a hunger that sent chills racing down my spine. Then, as if sensing my growing discomfort, he leaned closer, a sly smile creeping across his face. "Do you ever feel like people are hiding their true selves?" he asked, his voice low and conspiratorial. I wanted to laugh it off as a joke, but the weight of his gaze made it impossible. I could feel the walls closing in around me, and panic began to bubble beneath the surface. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. The tension became palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. I glanced toward the door, considering my options, but before I could make a move, he reached out and touched my arm, his fingers cold against my skin. The room seemed to spin, and for a moment, I was lost in his gaze. It was like he was pulling me into the depths of his mind, and I could feel the darkness wrapping around me. Just as I was about to voice my concern, the power went out, plunging us into darkness. My heart raced as I fumbled for my phone, the light casting eerie shadows on the walls. I could hear him breathing a low, steady rhythm in the silence. I was on the verge of panic when I finally managed to find the switch for the flashlight. When the beam of light cut through the darkness, I was met with a sight that made my blood run cold. The paintings on the walls were grotesque depictions of people, their faces twisted in anguish. It was then that I realized they weren't just art, they were portraits. Portraits of women who had gone missing in the area over the past few years. My stomach churned as dread washed over me. I stood up, the adrenaline kicking in. I needed to get out, but he was already blocking the door, a smirk plastered across his face. "You can't leave just yet," he said, his voice dripping with malice. It hit me then. This wasn't just a bad date. I was in the presence of someone truly dangerous, a predator who thrived on fear. I took a step back, my mind racing as I searched for an escape. The walls felt like they were closing in, and I could feel the panic rising in my chest. Just as I was about to make a run for it, the lights flickered back to life. But instead of relief, my heart sank further. The flickering revealed that he had moved closer, his eyes gleaming with a manic intensity. In that moment of desperation, I did the only thing I could think of. I lunged toward the window, praying it would open. Just as I managed to yank it up, I heard him shout something behind me, but I didn't look back. I climbed out and dropped to the ground, the cold pavement hitting me hard. I took off running, my feet pounding against the concrete as I fled into the night, the echoes of his laughter chasing me down the street. I didn't stop until I reached my car, my hands trembling as I fumbled for the keys. I cranked the engine, the sound roaring to life, and sped away into the darkness. As I drove, the adrenaline slowly began to fade, leaving behind a hollow feeling deep in my gut. I thought I had escaped, but the images of that night would haunt me for a long time. Days turned into weeks, and I tried to put the experience behind me. But there was always a lingering fear, a paranoia that settled into my bones. And then, one evening, I received a notification on my phone, a new message from Hinge. My heart raced as I opened it, and I froze in shock. It was from Jake. He had sent me a simple message. "You really should have stayed." I hadn't thought much of the app when I downloaded it. Just another dating platform, right? But the interface was sleek, and the algorithm was supposed to be super smart. I started swiping, and to my surprise, I found a match almost immediately. His name was Jake. We exchanged a few messages, and I could feel a spark. He had that charming vibe, a dash of mystery that kept me intrigued. We decided to meet up at a cozy coffee shop downtown, a place I frequented. It was supposed to be casual, but as the days passed, it felt like I was preparing for a first date with a celebrity rather than just some guy I met online. When the day finally arrived, I arrived at the cafe, my heart racing a bit more than usual. The place was warm, with the smell of roasted beans filling the air. I settled into a corner table, my eyes darting to the door every few seconds. When he walked in, I felt a rush of excitement. Jake was even better looking than his pictures, tall with dark hair and an easy smile that made me feel at ease. We talked for hours, sharing stories that made us laugh and some that made us cringe. I felt a connection like I hadn't felt in a long time. But as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the cafe, I noticed something strange about him. There was a flicker of intensity in his eyes, a seriousness that seemed to contradict his playful demeanor. It was as if he was studying me, trying to peel back my layers. I shrugged it off. Maybe it was just my imagination, but the feeling lingered, gnawing at the back of my mind. After our coffee date, we exchanged numbers, and I found myself texting him late into the night. The conversation flowed easily, but there was always something lurking beneath the surface. I started to notice little things that felt off. He would ask about my past relationships in a way that felt probing, almost invasive. I tried to brush it off as mere curiosity, but each question felt like he was trying to dissect my history and my fears. A few days later, he suggested we go for a hike in a nearby forest. I love the outdoors, so I agreed. The day of the hike, the weather was perfect, sunny, but with a gentle breeze that kept the heat at bay. We drove to the trailhead, and I felt a rush of excitement. It was just us, surrounded by nature. The trail wound through towering trees, sunlight filtering through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on the ground. The air was crisp and fresh, and I felt invigorated as we walked side by side. As we hiked deeper into the woods, I noticed how quiet it was. The usual sounds of birds and rustling leaves seemed to fade, replaced by an eerie silence. I glanced at Jake, who walked ahead of me, his jaw set tightly. It was like he was a man on a mission, and I felt a growing unease. I tried to shake it off, convincing myself I was just being paranoid. After a while, we reached a clearing with a stunning view of the valley below. I took a moment to soak it all in, but Jake seemed restless. He paced back and forth, staring out into the distance. It was then that I noticed a strange mark on a nearby tree, a carving that looked like a symbol, two interlocking circles with a line through them. I pointed it out to him, and he took a sharp breath, his expression darkening. He told me it was an old symbol, associated with a local legend about the forest. Something about it made me shiver. He spoke with a fervor that made me uneasy, his eyes glinting in the sunlight. I tried to laugh it off, but there was an edge to his voice that made me want to back away. As we continued our hike, he grew more intense, his questions about my life becoming more intrusive. He wanted to know about my childhood, my family, my dreams. It felt like he was trying to piece together a puzzle, and I was the missing piece. I started to feel trapped, like I was being lured into a web I couldn't escape. The sun began to set, bathing the forest in an orange glow. I suggested we head back, but he insisted we keep going. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach as we ventured deeper into the woods. The trees seemed to close in around us, the path narrowing and twisting. I felt lost, and panic began to seep in. Then, out of nowhere, Jake stopped and turned to me, his expression shifting from intensity to something more sinister. He told me he had a secret, something he wanted to share. My heart raced as he stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. He said he had been watching me for a long time, how he admired my life from afar. I felt a chill run down my spine as his words sunk in. Before I could react, he grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. I pulled away, confusion and fear swirling inside me. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs felt like they were glued to the ground. He leaned in closer, his breath hot against my ear, and I could smell the coffee on his breath mixed with something else, something metallic. Suddenly, the world around us shifted, as if the very air had thickened. I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears, drowning out the silence of the forest. I tried to reason with him, but he was lost in his own madness, his gaze darting around as if he could see something I couldn't. Just then, a noise broke through the tension, a distant rustling in the bushes. My instincts kicked in. I turned and bolted down the path, branches scratching at my arms as I pushed my way through the underbrush. I could hear him calling after me, his voice turning from pleading to angry, and I ran faster, my lungs burning as I tried to escape the chaos that had unfolded. I stumbled into a clearing, breathing heavily, my heart hammering in my chest. I looked around, trying to find a way out, but the trees loomed like dark sentinels, blocking any escape. And that's when I saw it, the same symbol carved into a tree, but this time, it was surrounded by what looked like small stones arranged in a circle. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just a hike. He had drawn me into something much darker. I turned to run back the way I came, but Jake was there, blocking my path, a wild look in his eyes. He stepped closer, and I could see a glint of something shiny in his hand. It was a knife, glistening ominously in the fading light. I backed away, my mind racing as I tried to figure out my next move. But then, out of nowhere, a loud crash echoed through the forest, and the ground shook beneath us. Jake stumbled, and in that moment of chaos, I took my chance. I darted past him, adrenaline surging through me as I sprinted down the path. I didn't stop until I reached the car, fumbling with the keys as I desperately looked back. The forest was silent again, and I felt a strange sense of dread wash over me. Just as I climbed into the driver's seat, I caught a glimpse of Jake standing in the shadows, his expression unreadable. I sped away, the adrenaline coursing through my veins as I left the forest behind. I didn't stop until I reached the edge of the city, my heart still racing. I thought I was free, but the memory of that hike haunted me. Days turned into weeks, and I tried to shake it off. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw that symbol, and I heard his voice echoing in my mind. It was as if he had marked me somehow, and I couldn't escape it. Then, one evening, I received a text from an unknown number. It was simple, just a single word: hello. My heart dropped as I recognized the familiar tone. It was Jake, and suddenly, I felt the walls closing in again. I thought I had escaped, but the nightmare had only just begun. I had always been a bit of a skeptic when it came to online dating. It felt like a game where everyone was pretending to be someone they weren't. But after a few too many nights spent scrolling through my phone, I decided to give Hinge a shot. The app promised a more genuine experience, and I figured it couldn't hurt to meet someone new. I created a profile, carefully selecting photos that showed me at my best: a goofy smile at a friend's wedding, a candid shot hiking in the woods, and one of me at the beach, looking sun-kissed and carefree. I answered the prompts with a mix of humor and sincerity, hoping to attract someone who matched my vibe. A few swipes later, I came across a profile that caught my eye. His name was Jake. He had this rugged, adventurous look about him, with tousled hair and a charming smile that made him seem approachable. His prompts were intriguing. He wrote about his love for exploring abandoned places, how he found beauty in decay, and how he believed life was too precious to waste on routine. It was captivating, and I felt a strange pull toward him. After a few exchanges, we decided to meet in person. He suggested a little cafe on the outskirts of town, known for its vintage charm and quirky decor. The day of our date, I dressed carefully, wanting to make a good impression while still feeling comfortable. I arrived at the cafe early and settled into a cozy corner, sipping my coffee and trying to quell the flutter of nerves in my stomach. When he walked in, I felt my heart skip. Jake was even more attractive in person, radiating an effortless charisma. We chatted, and he was just as engaging and funny as I'd hoped. As the conversation flowed, I found myself relaxing, laughing at his stories about his explorations. He told me about the thrill of discovering forgotten places, how each creaky floorboard and peeling paint told a story. I was enchanted. After finishing our drinks, he suggested we take a walk. I was eager to keep the momentum going, so I agreed. We strolled through the quaint streets, the sun casting long shadows as it dipped lower in the sky. Eventually, he led me to an old, abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. It was crumbling and covered in vines, but there was something undeniably beautiful about it. I hesitated, but Jake's enthusiasm was contagious, and I found myself following him inside. The interior was dark, illuminated only by the soft glow of the fading light filtering through broken windows. As we wandered through the dusty rooms filled with forgotten remnants, I felt a mix of excitement and unease. There was something eerie about the place, the silence amplifying every creak and rustle. Jake seemed in his element, moving with confidence, while I clung to that initial spark of adventure. He led me deeper into the building, pointing out old machinery and faded graffiti. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were intruding on something that had been left alone for too long. As we entered a large, open space, I stopped, taking in the remnants of what had once been a bustling workshop. It was a strange mix of nostalgia and melancholy, and I felt like we were trespassing in a graveyard of lost dreams. That's when I noticed a door at the far end of the room, slightly ajar. My curiosity piqued, but a sense of foreboding crept in. I glanced at Jake, but he was too busy admiring a rusted piece of equipment to notice my hesitation. The door seemed to beckon me, and against my better judgment, I made my way over, pushing it open just enough to peer inside. The darkness beyond swallowed any light, and I felt a chill run down my spine. The air was musty, thick with the scent of decay. I stepped inside, my heart racing, half expecting something to leap out at me. The room was empty except for a single, dusty chair in the center and a cracked mirror hanging crookedly on the wall. I turned to call Jake, but the moment I did, I heard a soft sound behind me. I spun around, my pulse quickening. Nothing was there, just shadows dancing in the corners. I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the creeping sensation that I wasn't alone. I turned back to the door, ready to leave, but it slammed shut, the sound echoing in the silence. Panic surged through me as I pulled at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. I was trapped. I banged on the door, calling out for Jake, my voice shaky. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears, drowning out any other sound. Then a low chuckle echoed from the darkness, sending a jolt of terror through me. I pressed my back against the wall, scanning the room for any sign of escape. The mirror caught my eye again, and as I stepped closer, I caught a glimpse of something moving behind me in the reflection. I whipped around, but there was nothing there. Just the chair, now seeming more ominous than before. I turned back to the mirror, and that's when I saw him. Jake was no longer standing outside the door. Instead, he was in the reflection, a twisted smile on his face. My breath hitched as I realized he wasn't the charming guy I thought I'd met. The darkness behind him seemed to pulse, and I felt a wave of dread wash over me. He was watching me, his eyes glinting with something that sent chills down my spine. I stumbled back, my mind racing. This wasn't the adventure I signed up for. I pounded on the door again, desperation clawing at my throat. I could hear him laughing softly, the sound echoing eerily around me. It was no longer the playful laughter from earlier. This was something dark and unsettling. I turned to the chair, feeling a strange compulsion to approach it. The closer I got, the more I could sense a presence, as if it were beckoning me to sit. I shook my head, fighting the urge, but it was like a magnet pulling me in. Just as I was about to reach out, the door swung open, and Jake stepped inside, his expression unreadable. I stumbled back, my heart racing. I didn't know what to say or do. He didn't seem like the person I'd met earlier. He was somehow different. The shadows around him seemed to deepen, and I felt a chill creep down my spine. I turned to run, but he was faster, grabbing my arm and pulling me close. In that moment, I felt a surge of adrenaline, and I managed to break free, darting past him and out into the hallway. I didn't stop to look back. I just ran, my feet pounding against the ground as I raced for the exit. I burst through the door and into the fading light, the cool air hitting my face like a slap. I didn't stop running until I was back on the main road, gasping for breath. The cafe was just a few blocks away, a beacon of safety. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see Jake emerging from the shadows. But there was nothing, just the quiet of the evening, the world continuing on without a care. I didn't look at my phone until I was home, the screen lighting up the darkness of my room. There was a message from Jake, asking if I was okay and saying he'd been worried when I ran off. I stared at it, my heart racing. I didn't respond. As I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had escaped something far worse than a bad date. In a world where appearances could be deceiving, I had learned the hard way that sometimes the shadows we chase are the ones we should run from. I had always thought of online dating as a bit of a joke, like something that only desperate people resorted to. But when I found myself single after a messy breakup, I figured I'd give it a shot, if only to quell the loneliness gnawing at me. That's how I ended up on Hinge, scrolling through profiles late into the night, half-heartedly swiping left and right, wondering if my next big romance was just a click away. One night, while I was mindlessly going through profiles, I stumbled upon a guy named Ethan. He looked charming, with tousled hair and a sly smile that made me feel like he was in on some secret joke. His profile was minimal but intriguing, mentioning a love for horror movies and a penchant for long hikes. He seemed like the kind of guy I could get lost in conversation with, so I swiped right without thinking too much about it. We hit it off immediately. Our messages flowed easily. He was funny and engaging, and I found myself looking forward to our chats. He suggested we meet up for coffee at this little cafe on the outskirts of town, a place I'd never been to before. It had a reputation for being quaint, which I thought was a refreshing change from the usual crowded spots downtown. The day we were supposed to meet, a storm rolled in. The skies darkened, and the wind picked up, pushing through the trees and rattling the windows of my apartment. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should cancel, but something inside me urged me to go. After all, I was tired of being cooped up alone. I grabbed my jacket, threw my hair into a messy bun, and set out into the storm. The cafe was tucked away down a narrow road, surrounded by thick woods. As I approached, the building loomed like a shadow against the backdrop of the swirling storm clouds. The sign above the door creaked in the wind, and the faint smell of coffee wafted through the air. I stepped inside, shaking off the rain, and immediately felt a sense of unease. The place was almost empty, with just a few patrons scattered around, lost in their own worlds. I spotted Ethan at the back, his dark hair falling into his eyes as he scrolled through his phone. He looked up as I approached, and his smile felt warm, easing my anxiety momentarily. We exchanged pleasantries, and I settled into the seat across from him. The conversation flowed easily at first, but as the rain pounded against the windows, a strange tension began to fill the air. Ethan shared his love for horror movies, recounting tales of his favorite flicks, but there was something unsettling about the way he spoke. His eyes shone with an intensity that made me uneasy. I brushed it off, attributing it to nerves, but as the storm raged outside, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He suggested we take a walk after coffee, and I hesitated. The storm had transformed the quaint cafe into something more sinister, but the allure of the unknown and the thrill of adventure pushed me to agree, even though a voice in my head told me I should head home. As we stepped outside, the rain had lessened to a drizzle, but the wind still howled through the trees. We wandered down a path that seemed to lead deeper into the woods, the tall trees casting eerie shadows around us. The further we went, the more isolated I felt. There were no other people around, just the sound of our footsteps crunching against the fallen leaves. Ethan's stories turned darker, weaving in tales of urban legends and ghostly encounters. I tried to laugh along, but with each tale, I felt a knot tightening in my stomach. I wanted to turn back, but I didn't want to seem rude or paranoid. I pushed through, reminding myself that I was an adult, not some scared kid. Then we reached a small clearing, illuminated only by the fading light of the stormy sky. In the center of the clearing stood an old, decrepit cabin, its windows boarded up and the door hanging crookedly on its hinges. Ethan's eyes lit up with excitement, and he suggested we explore it. My heart raced, but curiosity got the best of me. I followed him toward the cabin, the atmosphere thick with an unsettling energy. As we approached, I could feel the weight of the air pressing down on me, and a chill danced up my spine. The door creaked open, revealing darkness inside. Ethan stepped in without hesitation, and I hesitated on the threshold, a sense of dread washing over me. The inside smelled musty, like it hadn't been disturbed in years. I could barely see anything, but Ethan seemed to thrive in the darkness, his silhouette moving from one shadow to another. He called me in, his voice echoing off the walls, and I took a deep breath, forcing myself to step inside. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet, and I instinctively reached for my phone, turning on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing peeling wallpaper and broken furniture, remnants of a life long forgotten. Ethan stood at the back, peering into what looked like a small bedroom. As I approached, I noticed something odd. There were strange, cryptic symbols carved into the walls, almost like warnings etched into the wood. I was about to voice my concern when I turned back to Ethan, only to find him staring at me with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. He stepped closer, his eyes glinting in the dim light, and I felt a rush of panic. There was something in his expression that unnerved me, a predatory glimmer that made my heart race. I took a step back, my instinct screaming at me to get out. But before I could turn, he reached out, grabbing my wrist with a grip that was too tight, too possessive. In that moment, the realization hit me like a punch to the gut. All those horror stories he had told weren't just amusing anecdotes. They were confessions, revealing a darker side to him I had been blind to. I knew I had to escape, but the cabin felt like a trap, the walls closing in. Summoning every ounce of courage, I yanked my wrist free and darted toward the exit. The darkness seemed to stretch out, clawing at my heels as I rushed outside, the storm waiting for me like a merciless predator. I could hear him calling after me, but I didn't stop to look back. The rain pelted down as I ran through the woods, the slippery ground beneath my feet, making it hard to keep my footing. Panic surged through me, propelling me forward. I didn't stop until I reached the main road, my heart racing, breath coming in ragged gasps. I flagged down a passing car, barely able to contain my relief as I jumped into the back seat, gasping out my destination. As the driver sped away, I glanced back, half expecting to see Ethan emerging from the trees. But the wood stood silent, the storm still raging as if it were hiding secrets of its own. When I finally made it home, I collapsed on my bed, my mind racing with thoughts of what had just happened. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped something terrible. I was shaken, but as I scrolled through my phone to delete the Hinge app, my heart sank. There, in my messages, was a new notification from Ethan. It was a picture of the cabin, dark and foreboding, with the words, "You'll come back. I know you will." I remember the night everything changed, the one that started like any other. I had just moved to this sleepy little town, a place where the air felt different, almost thick with secrets. It was a Saturday, and I was bored out of my mind, scrolling through my phone, when I stumbled upon this new dating app called Hinge. The way people described it was like a shiny new toy, something that promised connection but could easily turn into something else entirely. I decided to give it a shot. Setting up my profile felt like an exercise in self-creation. I chose pictures that captured my quirks, me hiking in the woods, laughing at a coffee shop, and one where I was holding my cat, Mr. Whiskers, who had a knack for photobombing every shot. To be fair, I was feeling a bit hopeful, or maybe just desperate for a change. I swiped through profiles, my heart racing a little each time I saw someone intriguing. My mind was racing with possibilities, and I was ready to dive in. That's when I came across his profile. His name was Aaron, and he had this intense gaze in his photos, with dark hair that fell just above his brow and a smile that could light up a room. His interests were eclectic, a mix of classic literature, indie movies, and a love for the outdoors. He seemed perfect, almost too perfect. So, I swiped right, and to my surprise, we matched. We started chatting, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. He asked about my favorite books, and I gushed about my love for Gothic novels, mentioning how the eerie atmosphere always drew me in. He seemed captivated by my passion, and that was a refreshing change. He flirted lightly, his words wrapping around me like a warm blanket on a cold winter night. But there was something about him that sent a slight chill down my spine, a feeling I couldn't quite shake off. It was as if I was standing at the edge of a dark forest, sensing that something was lurking just beyond the trees. After a few days of chatting, Aaron suggested we meet up. He proposed a quaint little cafe on the outskirts of town, nestled between towering trees that seemed to whisper secrets to each other. I hesitated for a moment, but curiosity got the better of me. I agreed, my heart fluttering with anticipation and a hint of trepidation. The day of our meeting arrived, and I dressed carefully, wanting to make a good impression but not overdo it. As I approached the cafe, the air was thick with the scent of roasted coffee beans and something else, something sweet yet unsettling. The cafe was cozy, with mismatched furniture that gave it a homey feel. I spotted Aaron sitting at a corner table, and my stomach knotted with excitement and nerves. He looked even better in person, his eyes sparkling with mischief as he waved me over. We dove into conversation immediately, discussing everything from our favorite movies to our childhood dreams. But as the hours passed, I noticed something odd. Every time I looked at him, there was a flicker of something dark behind his smile, like a shadow flitting across his expression. I tried to brush it off as my imagination, but the feeling lingered, gnawing at me. After 2 hours of laughter and shared stories, Aaron suggested we take a walk in the nearby woods. I hesitated, feeling a twinge of unease at the idea of venturing into the darkening forest with someone I barely knew. But the thrill of adventure and the need to push my boundaries overrode my instincts. We strolled along the narrow path, surrounded by towering pines that seemed to loom over us like ancient sentinels. The atmosphere shifted as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that danced around us. As we walked deeper into the woods, I felt a strange sensation, as if the trees were closing in around us. The laughter from earlier faded, replaced by an uncomfortable silence. I glanced at Aaron, who was now walking a little ahead, his shoulders tense. There was an intensity in the way he moved, like he was drawn to something just beyond my sight. I quickened my pace to catch up, but he didn't seem to notice my unease. Suddenly, we came upon a small clearing, the moonlight spilling down like silver water. In the center was an old, abandoned cabin, its windows boarded up and its wood weathered and gray. It felt eerily out of place, like a remnant of forgotten time. Aaron's eyes lit up with exhilaration, and he turned to me, a wild grin on his face, suggesting we explore it. My heart raced at the thought, but I didn't want to seem scared. As we approached the cabin, I hesitated, a chill crawling up my spine. The door creaked open with a groan, revealing a dark interior filled with forgotten memories. Dust danced in the air as we stepped inside, and I felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over me. The walls were covered in strange markings, symbols that looked almost ritualistic. Aaron's enthusiasm seemed to amplify the tension. He was entranced by the energy of the place, while I felt trapped in an unseen web of fear. I tried to shake off the feeling, focusing on the strange artifacts scattered around: a rusted knife, a tattered book, and an old mirror that reflected our pale faces, distorted by the dim light. As I peered into the mirror, I noticed something flicker behind us. I turned quickly, but there was nothing there. Just the silence of the cabin, thick and suffocating. Aaron continued exploring, his movements growing more erratic. He picked up the knife, examining it with a strange intensity, his expression shifting as if he were caught in a trance. I felt my heart pound, a primal instinct screaming at me to leave. I took a step back, my breath hitching in my throat, but he turned to me, eyes dark and unfocused. It was then that I realized something was terribly wrong. The man I had met at the cafe, the charming stranger who had captivated me, was slipping away, replaced by someone else entirely. Panic surged through me. I needed to get out of there. I turned to the door, but it slammed shut with a force that rattled the walls. My heart raced as I pushed against it, but it wouldn't budge. In that moment, the cabin transformed. The air grew thick, almost suffocating, as shadows swirled around us. I could hear whispers, low and unintelligible, echoing through the walls. My mind raced, trying to understand what was happening, but all I could feel was the overwhelming urge to escape. I turned back to Aaron, but he was no longer the man I had met, his face contorted with something dark, something primal. I bolted toward a window, desperate to escape the nightmare unfolding around me. I could feel the chill of the glass against my fingertips as I shoved against it, but it wouldn't break. The whispers grew louder, drowning out my thoughts, wrapping around me like a vice. Aaron lunged, and I ducked just in time, the energy of the cabin pulsating with every frantic heartbeat. In a moment of sheer desperation, I grabbed the rusted knife from the floor and faced him. My hands trembled, but I was ready to fight for my life. The shadows in the cabin throbbed with energy, and I could feel their presence pressing down on me. Aaron's eyes flared with something wild, something untamed. Then, just as quickly as it had started, the energy shifted again. A flash of recognition crossed his face, and for a brief moment, I saw the man I had first met. He looked terrified, pleading with me with his eyes. The cabin shook violently, and I could feel the walls closing in. I didn't know what was happening, but I couldn't stay. I lunged for the door again, fueled by fear and adrenaline. This time it opened. I stumbled out into the night, the cool air hitting me like a wave. I didn't look back as I ran, the whispers trailing behind me like a haunting melody. I didn't stop until I reached my car, panting and shaking, the weight of the cabin's darkness still clinging to me. I drove home in a daze, my mind reeling from what had just happened. I never saw Aaron again, but sometimes at night I hear those whispers echoing in my mind, a reminder that some connections are better left unexplored, that the darkness lurking behind a charming smile can be a reflection of something much deeper. And as I lay in bed, I can't shake the feeling that he's still out there, waiting in the shadows, and I wonder if I was ever truly safe. The rain was relentless that night, hammering against the windows like 1,000 tiny drummers. I remember sitting on my bed, scrolling through my phone, trying to distract myself from the creeping sense of isolation that had taken hold of me. I had tried the usual apps, but they felt stale, like leftovers from a week ago. So when I stumbled across this new dating app, Hinge, I thought, why not? It promised meaningful connections, which seemed like exactly what I needed. After a few swipes and some superficial chats, my heart momentarily raced when I matched with someone named Alex. His profile was intriguing, an amateur photographer with an adventurous spirit. The photos he shared were stunning, capturing everything from sprawling landscapes to intimate portraits of strangers lost in their own worlds. I felt an immediate connection, something deeper than the usual small talk. We exchanged messages, and with each one, a sense of anticipation grew. We settled on meeting at a quaint little cafe tucked away in a corner of town, a place I had never noticed before. I arrived a little early, my nerves a jumbled mess, but the warmth of the cafe enveloped me. The dim lighting and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee created a cozy atmosphere, but I felt a twinge of unease, like something was slightly off. I pushed the feeling aside, convincing myself it was just first date jitters. When Alex arrived, he was even more captivating in person. He had a disarming smile and an air of confidence that made me feel at ease. We talked effortlessly, sharing stories about our lives and dreams. Time flew by, and I found myself laughing more than I had in a long time. But as the conversation deepened, I noticed something strange. He would occasionally glance toward the cafe entrance, as if he were expecting someone. It was subtle, but it sent a chill down my spine. Eventually, we decided to take a walk around the nearby park. The rain had let up, leaving the air crisp and fresh, the ground slick and shimmering under the streetlights. We strolled along the path, and as we talked, I noticed more the way he looked at me. Intensely, almost as if he were trying to peel back layers of my soul. I felt exposed, but not in a bad way. It was exhilarating, this feeling of being seen. But then the atmosphere shifted. As we turned a corner, I spotted a figure in the distance, lurking by a cluster of trees. My heart raced as a wave of anxiety washed over me. I glanced at Alex, who seemed unfazed. He continued walking, his pace steady and relaxed, but I felt a pull to stop. I couldn't shake the feeling that the figure was watching us. I whispered a question to myself. Who was it? But Alex didn't seem to notice my discomfort. We walked deeper into the park, the shadows growing longer and the trees looming over us like silent sentinels. The figure slowly faded from view, but the feeling of being watched lingered. I tried to shake it off, focusing instead on Alex and the way he leaned in, his voice low and intimate. He spoke passionately about his photography, his eyes sparkling with enthusiasm, but I couldn't fully engage. My mind was racing, torn between my attraction to him and the nagging sense of danger that clung to the air like a thick fog. As we reached a secluded part of the park, I suggested heading back, but Alex insisted we explore a little more. There was a small, dilapidated gazebo up ahead, cloaked in darkness, and he seemed drawn to it. I hesitated, but the allure of his charisma was hard to resist. We approached the gazebo, its paint peeling and the wood creaking beneath our feet. It felt eerie, like stepping into a forgotten world. Inside, the atmosphere changed entirely. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of damp wood and moss. Alex leaned against a post, looking at me with an intensity that made my heart race. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear, and I felt a rush of warmth wash over me. But just as quickly, a shadow flickered at the edge of my vision. It was the figure again, now closer, standing just outside the gazebo, partially obscured by darkness. I froze, my breath hitching in my throat. My instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't move. Alex was still looking at me, lost in whatever moment he thought we were sharing. The figure stepped closer, and I could make out a face, pale and gaunt, eyes wide and unblinking. It felt like a scene from a horror movie, and I was the unwitting victim trapped in the plot. Suddenly, the figure spoke, and the voice was chillingly familiar. It was a woman, her tone dripping with bitterness. She claimed to know Alex, to know everything about him. Panic shot through my veins as I realized I had never heard him mention anyone like her. I turned to Alex, seeking reassurance, but his expression remained unfazed, almost amused. The woman stepped into the dim light of the gazebo, and I recognized her. It was a face I had seen in his photos, one of the strangers he had captured on camera. Her haunting beauty twisted into something grotesque as she approached, her eyes locked onto his. My heart raced as I pieced it all together. Alex had been using her image as bait, luring women into this trap. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted entirely. The air grew colder, and something dark flickered behind Alex's eyes. I felt a wave of dread wash over me. I took a step back, my instinct screaming at me to run. The woman reached out, her hand trembling, and for a fleeting moment, I felt a connection, a shared terror, a silent plea for escape. But Alex moved between us, a predator protecting his territory. I turned to flee, adrenaline surging as I sprinted down the path, the sound of footsteps echoing behind me. I didn't dare look back, but I could feel them closing in, the weight of their gaze heavy on my back. I burst through the park's entrance, my heart pounding against my ribs, and I ran straight to my car parked just outside. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking, and finally, I got the door open and jumped inside, locking it behind me. As I drove away, the streets blurred past in a haze. I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see them trailing behind, but there was nothing, just the empty road stretching out behind me. My mind raced as I replayed the night in my head. Was it all a setup? Had Alex been playing a game I didn't even know existed? The unease settled in my stomach like a stone. I arrived home and bolted inside, locking the door behind me as if that would keep the nightmares at bay. I sank onto my bed, trying to calm my racing heart. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, and I picked it up to see a message. It was from Alex, but it wasn't just a simple text. It was a photo of me, taken moments before I had run away, my face pale and terrified. The message read, "You were perfect for my collection." I remember the thrill of swiping right like it was yesterday, the excitement bubbling up as I sat on my bed, scrolling through endless profiles on Hinge. I was fresh out of a long relationship, and the thought of meeting someone new, someone exciting, made my heart race. The pictures, the bios, the quirky prompts. It was like an endless game. I was looking for a connection, but mostly I was just looking for a distraction. One night, after a few too many glasses of wine, I came across a profile that caught my eye. His name was Eric, and his bio was like a breath of fresh air compared to the usual lines. He was into vintage books, late-night drives, and had a fascination with old horror films. His photos were all dark and moody, capturing the essence of a brooding artist. I couldn't help but swipe right. Within minutes, my phone buzzed. A match. I could hardly believe it. We started chatting, and he was even more intriguing in person, or at least through the screen. He had this way of sharing thoughts that made my skin tingle. The conversation flowed easily, and he seemed to understand me in a way that most people didn't. I felt like I had known him forever, even though we had just met. After a week of late-night chats, we decided to meet up. He suggested a little cafe tucked away in a dimly lit alley. I thought it would be the perfect place to get to know each other. As I walked there, the streetlights flickered ominously, casting long shadows that danced along the cobblestone path. The air was thick with an unsettling stillness, as if the world was holding its breath. When I arrived, the cafe was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the chill outside. Eric was already there, sitting in a corner booth, a battered book open in front of him. He looked just like his pictures, with a messy head of hair and a half-smile that sent a thrill through me. The moment I sat down, I noticed how his eyes seemed to glint with something deeper, something almost unnerving. Our conversation flowed like a river, winding through topics of art and literature. But every once in a while, there was an undercurrent, a tension that made me uneasy. He had a way of asking questions that felt invasive, probing the corners of my mind I had long buried. I shrugged it off, attributing it to his intensity. I was drawn to him, despite the creeping feeling in my gut. As the night wore on, the cafe emptied out, leaving just us and the barista, who was busy cleaning up. The atmosphere shifted. The soft music in the background faded into a haunting melody. Eric leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper, asking me about my fears. I shared a few. Heights, the dark. But he pressed further, his gaze boring into me. "What about your deepest fear?" he asked, a glimmer of something unsettling in his eyes. I hesitated, feeling the weight of his stare. I wanted to say something light, something that wouldn't give him the satisfaction of knowing my vulnerabilities. But the truth was, I feared loneliness, the idea of being trapped in my own mind. He smiled, almost too wide, and I felt a chill run down my spine. It was as if he could see through my facade, peeling back the layers I had carefully constructed. I wanted to change the subject, but the words caught in my throat. "Let's take a drive," he suggested suddenly, breaking the tension. The idea seemed spontaneous and thrilling, so I agreed. We left the cafe and climbed into his old, beat-up car. The engine rumbled to life, and the city lights flickered as we drove deeper into the night. As we navigated through winding roads, the darkness enveloped us like a thick fog. I was excited, but my heart raced for a different reason now. The further we drove, the more isolated we became. The trees lining the road morphed into dark silhouettes, looming like sentinels. I tried to shake off the feeling of dread creeping over me, focusing instead on the sound of Eric's voice as he shared stories about his life. But then he took a turn down a bumpy dirt road, and my stomach dropped. The car bounced along, and I felt the familiar sense of panic rising. I wanted to tell him to turn back, to head to the safety of the city, but I didn't want to seem rude. Eventually, we came to a stop in front of an old, abandoned house. Moonlight streamed through broken windows, casting eerie shadows on the ground. Eric smiled, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "Let's check it out," he said, already unbuckling his seatbelt. A wave of apprehension washed over me, but curiosity won out. I followed him towards the house, the crunch of gravel beneath our feet echoing in the silence. Inside, the air was stale, filled with the scent of mold and decay. Dust danced in the beams of moonlight, and I felt like we had stepped into another world, one long forgotten. Each room we explored was a snapshot of a time long gone, furniture draped in white sheets, cobwebs hanging like forgotten memories. Eric led the way, his enthusiasm infectious, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The shadows seemed to shift and swirl around us, and every creak of the old floorboards made my heart race. In the living room, we found an old mirror, its surface cracked and tarnished. Eric stood in front of it, a smile playing on his lips. "Look at us," he said, his reflection distorted in the glass. But when I stepped closer, I didn't see us. I saw something else, figures lurking in the darkness behind us, their forms barely visible. I gasped, stepping back. "Did you see that?" I asked, my voice trembling. Eric turned, his expression shifting. "What do you mean?" I pointed, but when he looked again, there was nothing there, just shadows and the echo of our breaths. The unease settled back into my gut, twisting like a snake. I wanted to leave, to escape the suffocating atmosphere, but Eric seemed unfazed. "Let's check the basement," he suggested, and before I could protest, he was already heading down the creaky stairs. I hesitated, the darkness yawning before me, but I couldn't let him go alone. I followed, every step heavy with dread. The basement was cold, the air thick and damp. We fumbled for our phones, using the light to guide us through the gloom. Old boxes lined the walls, filled with forgotten relics. As we rummaged through the junk, Eric's demeanor shifted again. He became more intense, almost manic. "Isn't this incredible?" he asked, holding up a dusty old doll with a cracked porcelain face. I forced a smile, but inside I felt a cold knot of fear tightening. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the basement plunged into darkness. My heart raced as I fumbled for my phone, the flashlight beam cutting through the shadows. I could hear Eric's breathing, and it sounded different, sharper, more erratic. "Eric," I called out, but there was no response. Panic surged through me, and I turned to find him, but he was gone. The weight of the darkness pressed down, and I felt the walls closing in. I stumbled backward, my pulse racing as I heard a soft whisper, a voice that felt all too familiar. "You're not alone." In that moment, I realized the truth. Eric was not who he claimed to be. The connection we shared was a trap, a carefully woven snare. I turned to run, but the shadows closed in, the whispers growing louder, mocking me. I raced up the stairs, fueled by sheer adrenaline, burst through the door, and sprinted toward the car. It felt like the darkness was reaching for me, clawing at my back. I fumbled for the keys, my hands shaking, and finally, I got the door open and slid inside, locking it just in time. But as I looked up, my breath caught in my throat. Eric was standing outside, his face illuminated by the moonlight, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You were always meant to be here, you know," he said, voice low and chilling. That's when I understood. I wasn't the first to fall for his charm. The house, the whispers, the darkness, it was all part of his twisted game. And as I started the engine and sped away, I realized I had escaped, but the haunting feeling that I was never truly free lingered in the back of my mind. I thought I had left him behind, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. The thought gnawed at me as I drove into the night, the shadows stretching behind me like a dark promise. The night was thick with an unsettling stillness, one of those evenings where the air felt heavy and every sound seemed amplified, like the world was holding its breath. I'll never forget the first time I logged onto that dating app, the one everyone raved about, Hinge. It was supposed to be different, more genuine than the other ones. I had just moved to a new city, still unpacking boxes and trying to find my place. The loneliness wrapped around me like a suffocating blanket. So I thought, why not? I was ready to meet someone new, maybe even find something real. After swiping through a bunch of profiles, I stumbled across a guy named Eric. His pictures were all warm smiles and cozy coffee shop vibes, and there was something about his profile that caught my eye. He was into hiking, dogs, and had a penchant for horror movies. Honestly, I was sold. I shot him a message, and to my surprise, he responded almost immediately. We chatted for hours, sharing our favorite films and the quirks that made us tick. It felt easy, too easy. As the conversation flowed, I felt that familiar sense of excitement creeping in, the kind that makes your heart race a little faster. We agreed to meet up a few days later at a local cafe. I arrived early, nervous energy buzzing within me. The place was quaint, filled with the rich aroma of roasted coffee beans and the low murmur of conversation. I sipped my drink, glancing at the door every few moments. When Eric finally walked in, my heart did that little leap. He looked even better in person, tall, with dark hair that fell just right, and those eyes that seemed to hold secrets. The date went smoothly, or so I thought. We laughed at the same jokes, enjoyed the same flavors of gelato, and talked about everything under the sun. As the night wore on, I felt more and more drawn to him, but there was something strange lurking beneath the surface. It was subtle, a sense of unease I couldn't quite place. He seemed to know a little too much about me for someone I had just met. I brushed it off, thinking it was just an odd coincidence. As we walked through the park afterward, the streetlights flickered against the darkening sky, casting long shadows that danced eerily on the ground. I noticed Eric's gaze drifting, almost like he was scanning the area. When I asked if he was all right, he laughed it off, claiming he was just a little paranoid. I chuckled with him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. We parted ways that night, and as I lay in bed, I replayed every moment of our date in my mind. It was thrilling, but the nagging doubt lingered like a bad dream. I chalked it up to nerves and decided to give it another shot. We texted back and forth over the next few days, and he seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me better. But the deeper we dove into conversation, the more unsettling it became. He would ask me about my childhood, and with each answer, his responses became increasingly personal, almost intrusive. Then came the night He invited me to his place for a movie marathon. I hesitated a bit, but curiosity got the better of me. His apartment was decorated with horror memorabilia, posters of classic films plastered on the walls, and an overwhelming scent of popcorn hung in the air. I felt a rush of excitement mixed with apprehension. We settled down on the couch, and as the first movie played, the atmosphere shifted. Eric's laughter felt strained, and I caught him glancing at me more than at the screen. It was unsettling, and I found myself tensing up as he leaned closer. When I shifted away slightly, he seemed to take offense, masking it with a forced smile. The flickering light from the screen cast shadows across his face, making his features appear more pronounced, more intense. As the night wore on, he began to share stories of his past relationships, but they were oddly dark, filled with themes of obsession and betrayal. Each tale made my heart race, with a mix of fear and intrigue. I felt trapped, both fascinated and horrified by the way he spoke. It was as if he was trying to reveal something about himself, but I wasn't quite sure if I wanted to know more. When the last movie ended, the clock showed it was well past midnight. I felt the weight of exhaustion settling in, but there was also a heavy tension hanging in the air. Eric suggested we watch one more movie, but I politely declined, claiming I needed to get home. His smile faltered for a moment, and I felt a twinge of regret, but the need to escape was overpowering. As I gathered my things, I noticed something peculiar, a small, framed photo on the wall next to the couch. It was a group picture of Eric and a woman, her smile wide and bright. But something was off. The woman's eyes looked eerily vacant, almost as if she was trapped in a moment she couldn't escape. I brushed the thought aside, feeling a chill run down my spine. I quickly said my goodbyes and practically ran out the door. In the days that followed, I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting. I texted Eric, and he responded quickly, charming and warm as always. But the feeling of unease didn't dissipate. I began to notice little things that added to my discomfort. He would reference conversations we hadn't had, and his knowledge of my life felt invasive. I started to question whether I was losing my grip on reality or if he was genuinely unhinged. Then came the night I got a message from him saying he had a surprise for me. My heart raced with a mix of excitement and dread. He insisted I come over, and against my better judgment, I agreed. When I walked into his apartment, the atmosphere felt different, heavier, charged with something I couldn't quite put my finger on. The lights were dimmed, and he had set up a projector for a private screening. As the movie played, I felt every nerve in my body scream for me to leave. The film was a twisted horror story, but more than that, it felt eerily familiar, like a sick reflection of my own life. Each scene seemed to mirror conversations we'd had, moments he had latched onto with sick fascination. I turned to Eric, expecting to find amusement on his face, but instead, I saw something darker, a gleam in his eyes that sent a jolt of fear through me. I stood up abruptly, my heart racing. I couldn't stay there any longer. As I turned to leave, he grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly tight. I felt panic flood my veins. His expression shifted from playful to something much more sinister, and I knew I needed to escape. I wrenched my arm free and dashed for the door, my heart pounding as I flung it open and bolted down the hallway. I didn't stop running until I was outside, the cool night air hitting my face like a slap. I fumbled for my phone to call a friend, to get out of that nightmare. But as I looked down at the screen, my blood ran cold. There was a message from Eric. It was a picture, a photo of me taken from the street outside my apartment, my window lit up in the dark. My heart sank as I realized he had been watching me, lurking in the shadows. The horror of it hit me like a freight train, and I stumbled back, gasping for breath. I looked around frantically, expecting him to emerge from the darkness at any moment. I didn't know what he wanted, but I knew it was something far worse than I could have ever imagined. I turned and ran, the chill of fear coursing through me as I fled into the unknown, desperate to escape whatever twisted game he had been playing. I didn't know if I'd ever feel safe again, but one thing was certain. I was done with dating apps, done with trying to connect with strangers. Some connections are best left unexplored, buried beneath layers of darkness that should never see the light of day. I never thought I'd end up on a dating app, but there I was, scrolling through profiles on Hinge one rainy Tuesday evening. The patter of raindrops against my window felt oddly comforting, like a background score to my solitary life. Most of my friends were swiping away, finding their matches, while I remained stuck in a cycle of swiping left, until I stumbled upon a profile that sent a rush of excitement through me. The guy's name was Ethan, and his smile drew me in like a moth to a flame. He had an air of mystery, with dark hair and deep-set eyes that seemed to hold secrets. His profile was simple, just a few pictures and a tagline that read, "Looking for something real." I matched with him immediately. His messages were smooth and charming, with just the right amount of humor. We talked for days, sharing stories and jokes, and I found myself looking forward to our conversations. Ethan lived in a quaint little town about an hour away, but he suggested that we meet halfway for a coffee. Despite my excitement, a small voice in the back of my head whispered caution, but I brushed it off. After all, he seemed genuine, right? The day of our coffee date arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves. I chose a cozy cafe nestled between old brick buildings, the kind that had a warm, inviting atmosphere. The air was filled with the rich aroma of coffee and the soft murmurs of conversations. I arrived early, anxiously stirring my drink while glancing at the door every few minutes. When Ethan finally walked in, he looked just like his pictures. My heart raced as he approached me, his smile warm and inviting. We talked easily, laughing and sharing stories. But as the coffee cups emptied, I noticed something odd. Ethan had a tendency to glance around, his eyes darting toward the windows as if he were searching for something or someone. I brushed it off as paranoia. It was just nerves, right? The atmosphere shifted when I suggested we take a walk around the town after our coffee. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow over everything, and I wanted to enjoy the evening. Ethan agreed, but as we stepped outside, I felt a chill creep into the air. The streets were surprisingly empty for a Saturday evening, and the silence felt oppressive, like the calm before a storm. We strolled down the cobblestone path, and I found myself asking more questions to keep the conversation flowing. I wanted to know more about him, but every time I probed deeper, Ethan deflected with a joke or a change of topic. My curiosity began to morph into unease. There was something about the way he looked at me, intense yet distant, that left me feeling exposed. And then, as we turned a corner into a dimly lit alley, I saw it, a shadow lurking at the end, barely visible in the half-light. I paused, a sense of dread washing over me. Ethan seemed to notice my hesitation and chuckled lightly, but the sound felt forced. My instinct screamed at me to turn back, but I convinced myself it was nothing. It was just an alley after all. As we continued walking, I felt the weight of his stare, almost as if he were studying me. The conversation dwindled, replaced by an unsettling silence that wrapped around us like a thick fog. I glanced at my phone, the screen illuminating my face in the dark. I considered texting a friend, just to check in, but I didn't want to seem paranoid. Ethan suggested we head to a nearby park, which was supposed to be beautiful at night. I hesitated but nodded, hoping the change of scenery would ease my tension. The park was eerily quiet. The only sounds were the rustling leaves and the distant chirping of crickets. As we walked deeper into the park, I tried to shake off the feeling of being watched that clung to me. We found a bench and sat down, the night air heavy with an unexplainable tension. Ethan started talking about his life, but I found it hard to concentrate. My mind was racing, replaying every moment since we met. I wanted to trust him, but something felt off. I could sense the darkness lurking beneath his charming facade, and I didn't know why. Suddenly, he leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. He spoke of secrets, of a hidden world that lay just beneath the surface. His words were hypnotic, and I found myself drawn in even as my gut told me to be cautious. I felt trapped in a web of intrigue and discomfort, unable to pull away. Just as the conversation took a more sinister turn, a loud crash echoed through the park. It startled me, and I jerked back, my heart pounding. Ethan's expression shifted. He looked almost excited, a glint of something dark in his eyes. I wanted to run, but I felt paralyzed, caught in a moment where the danger was palpable yet intangible. Without warning, Ethan stood up, his movements quick and deliberate. He glanced around, and for a split second, I saw genuine fear cross his face. It was as if he had transformed from a charming stranger into someone completely different. I stood up, ready to leave, but he reached out, grabbing my wrist. I felt a jolt of panic course through me, and I pulled away instinctively. In that moment, I turned to flee, adrenaline pumping through my veins. I sprinted through the park, the shadows closing in around me. I could hear his footsteps behind me, but I didn't dare look back. The exit felt like it was miles away, and I could feel the weight of dread pushing down on me. Finally, I burst onto the street, frantically searching for a place to hide. I spotted a brightly lit convenience store, the flickering neon sign a beacon of hope. I dashed inside, gasping for breath as I scanned the aisles for a familiar face. The cashier looked up, confusion in his eyes, but I didn't care. I glanced out the window, expecting to see Ethan right behind me, but he was gone. The relief was almost overwhelming, yet my mind raced with questions. I quickly pulled out my phone, ready to call a friend, but my hands trembled too much to type. Then, I noticed a notification on my screen. A message from Ethan. "You shouldn't have run, Sarah. You'll regret it." Chills ran down my spine as I realized I had never told him my name. My heart sank. The sense of safety I had felt just moments before shattered, replaced by a horrifying realization. I had been played from the start. I've always had a bit of fascination with online dating. You know, swiping through profiles, looking for that spark, wondering what kind of stories each person carries. I thought it was all fun and games until I met Claire. Her profile was simple but striking. A picture of her sitting on a beach, the sunset casting a warm glow around her. She had this smile that seemed to promise adventure, and her bio was filled with quirky interests that matched mine perfectly. We started chatting, and it felt like we'd known each other forever, sharing everything from our favorite movies to our weirdest childhood memories. After a week of chatting, we agreed to meet up at a quaint little coffee shop nestled between old brick buildings downtown. I remember feeling that giddy rush of anticipation, my heart racing as I walked through the heavy wooden door, the scent of fresh coffee enveloping me. I spotted her right away, sitting at a corner table, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders, a book in front of her. She looked up, and for a moment, everything felt like it was in slow motion. It was as if time had paused just for us. We talked for hours, laughing and sharing stories, the connection growing stronger by the minute. But I noticed something strange about her. There were moments when her laughter would fade, her eyes staring off into the distance, as if she were trapped in her own thoughts. I brushed it off at first, thinking maybe she was just shy or had a lot on her mind. But the more we talked, the more I felt a creeping unease. As the night wore on, I suggested we take a walk to a nearby park. The air was cool, the stars twinkling above us, but the shadows seemed to stretch longer as we strolled along the dimly lit path. Claire was quiet now, her hands tucked into the pockets of her jacket, her gaze fixed on the ground. I tried to lighten the mood, cracking jokes and sharing funny stories, but she barely responded. It made me feel like I was talking to a ghost. Just when I thought about changing the subject to something lighter, she stopped walking and turned to face me, her expression serious. She asked me if I believed in ghosts. I chuckled nervously, thinking she was joking, but she wasn't. She started telling me about her experiences with the supernatural, her voice low and eerie. She spoke of a haunted house her family used to live in, how they'd hear whispers in the night and see shadows darting through the halls. As she spoke, I felt a chill run down my spine. I wanted to laugh it off, to tell her it was just a story, but the intensity in her eyes made me hesitate. There was something unsettling about the way she described her past, as if she were recounting events that had deeply scarred her. I wanted to reach out, comfort her, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing on the edge of something dark. We continued our walk, but I couldn't help but feel the atmosphere shift. The park was empty, the shadows growing longer, and the sounds of the city faded into an eerie silence. My heart raced as we reached a secluded area, a small clearing surrounded by towering trees. It felt like a scene straight out of a horror movie. I suggested we turn back, but Claire insisted we stay a little longer. She sat down on a bench, and I followed suit, feeling the weight of the silence pressing down on us. I glanced at her, and she was staring off into the trees, her expression distant. That's when I noticed something strange. The air around us seemed to thicken, as if the very atmosphere was charged with an energy I couldn't quite understand. I felt an overwhelming urge to leave, but I didn't want to be rude. Suddenly, Claire turned to me, her eyes wide with an intensity that made my stomach drop. She spoke about her family again, how they were all connected to this place, how they had never really left. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up as she continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. She said she could feel them, the spirits of her ancestors, watching and waiting. My hands grew clammy as I glanced around, half expecting to see something lurking in the shadows. I tried to laugh it off, but the sound felt hollow in the thickening air. I suggested we leave, but Claire's expression shifted, and for a moment, I didn't recognize her. It was as if something else had taken over, a darkness flickering behind her eyes. She reached out, her hand brushing against mine, and I felt an icy chill travel up my arm. The world around us faded, and the only thing that mattered was her grip tightening on my hand. I pulled away instinctively, panic rising in my chest, and that's when I heard it, a low whisper, almost like a breath against my ear. My heart raced as I turned, expecting to see someone there, but the clearing was empty, the trees standing silent and still. Claire's demeanor shifted again, her eyes narrowing as she stared into the darkness. I could feel something building, a tension that was almost palpable. I stood up, ready to make a break for it, but she grabbed my wrist, her voice urgent. She begged me to stay, to listen, to understand, but all I could think about was getting out of there. In that moment, I realized I didn't just want to leave, I needed to. I yanked my arm free and took a step back, the fear spilling over. I told her I couldn't do this anymore. Her expression faltered, and for a moment, I saw the girl I had met at the coffee shop, but it quickly disappeared, replaced by something darker. She stood up, her posture shifting as if the weight of her family's history was pressing down on her. I turned to run, the air thick with dread, and as I bolted down the path, I could hear her calling after me, her voice echoing in the stillness. I didn't stop until I reached the street, the city lights breaking through the darkness, and only then did I dare look back. Claire stood at the edge of the park, the shadows consuming her, but there was something more terrifying than her figure. It was the realization that she hadn't moved. It was as if she was rooted to the spot, a statue caught between worlds. I stumbled away, my heart pounding in my chest, the chill of the night wrapping around me like a shroud. Days passed, and I tried to shake off the encounter. I deleted her number, unfollowed her on social media, but I couldn't escape the feeling that something was wrong. I found myself glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see her lurking in the shadows. Then, one evening, I received a message. It was a simple note, a picture of a park bench with a note scrawled across the bottom. "You can't run from your past." I stared at it, confusion mixing with fear. I looked up, scanning the street, but there was no one there. I tried to convince myself it was a prank, but deep down, I knew it was something more. It was a reminder of that night, a tether that pulled me back to her, to the darkness that seemed to linger just beneath the surface of her smile. I thought about reporting it, but what would I say? I was haunted by a girl I met on a dating app. Maybe it was all in my head. But then another message arrived, this time with a photo of the same bench, but now it was empty, and the caption read, "I'm always here." The more I thought about it, the more it consumed me. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality, haunted by a ghost that was all too real. I had to confront it. So, I decided to return to that park, to face whatever it was. When I arrived, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the path. My heart raced as I walked toward that clearing, the atmosphere heavy with anticipation. I half expected Claire to be there, waiting for me, but she wasn't. The bench stood empty, but I felt her presence, lurking just beyond the trees. Then I heard it, a soft whisper, almost like a sigh carried on the wind. I turned, and for a fleeting moment, I saw her, standing at the edge of the clearing, her expression unreadable. But then she was gone, and I was left standing alone, the chilling realization hitting me harder than before. Claire wasn't just a girl I met. She was a part of something much bigger, something that had been waiting for me. And as I stood there, the darkness closing in around me, I understood that I had opened a door I could never close. The final message echoed in my mind, a haunting reminder that sometimes the past isn't something we can escape. It follows us, waiting, watching, until we can't tell where we end, and it begins. When I first downloaded that dating app, I thought it would be a fun way to meet new people. I was still reeling from a breakup, and my friends convinced me to put myself out there. They said it would be great for my confidence. So, one rainy Thursday night, I swiped through profiles, half-heartedly looking for a connection. Most of the guys seemed average, but then I saw him. His name was Jake, and his smile practically leaped off the screen. He had this twinkle in his eye like he had a secret, something mischievous yet inviting. We matched, and my heart raced a little as I read his profile. He liked hiking, horror movies, and had a thing for old-school rock music. We started chatting, and it was easy. He had this way of making everything feel electric, like our words were weaving an invisible thread between us. After a few days of texting, he asked if I wanted to meet up for coffee. I felt a flutter of excitement, but also a twinge of anxiety. What if he was different in person? What if he didn't look like his pictures? But I pushed those thoughts aside. A coffee date sounded harmless. We decided to meet at a small cafe tucked away in a quiet part of town, one of those places that felt cozy and a little eclectic. The kind of place that had mismatched furniture and local art hanging on the walls. I arrived early, nerves bubbling in my stomach. I ordered a chai latte and took a seat by the window, watching the rain splatter against the glass. When Jake walked in, it was like the cafe dimmed a little, and all my worries faded. He looked exactly like his pictures, tousled hair, deep blue eyes, and that grin that made him look like he knew something I didn't. He sat down, and we started talking, laughter spilling from us like the rain outside. We shared stories about our lives, our dreams, and our fears, and for a moment, it felt like we were the only two people in the world. But as the conversation deepened, I couldn't shake this odd feeling creeping in. There was something about Jake that felt just a bit off, like he was holding back a part of himself. His gaze would linger a little too long, and when he smiled, it felt like there was a shadow lurking behind it. I brushed it off as paranoia. It was a first date, after all, and it's natural to feel a little uneasy. After our coffee, he suggested we go for a walk. I hesitated, glancing at the downpour outside, but he insisted it would be fun. So we dashed into the rain, laughter echoing as we dodged puddles, his hand brushing against mine. It felt romantic, yet that nagging discomfort didn't leave me. We wandered through the streets, eventually ending up in a park. It was eerily quiet, the rain creating a sort of muted symphony around us. As we walked, I noticed how the trees seemed to loom larger in the fading light, the shadows stretching and twisting in the corners of my vision. Jake seemed to thrive in the silence, his demeanor shifting from charming to contemplative. I asked him about his childhood, hoping to lighten the mood, but his response sent a chill down my spine. He spoke of a secluded house he grew up in, deep in the woods. He described it in vivid detail, the creaky floors, the sounds at night that made him feel watched, and the strange occurrences that had plagued his family. My skin prickled as he recounted a story about a neighbor who went missing. He laughed it off, but there was an intensity in his eyes that made me feel like he wasn't just telling a spooky story. He was reliving it. As we walked deeper into the park, the trees closed in around us, and I realized I could barely see the path ahead. The streetlights flickered, and the atmosphere shifted. I felt a sense of foreboding, like we had crossed into a different realm, one that didn't quite feel safe. I suggested we turn back, but Jake insisted on exploring a little further. My heart raced as I reluctantly followed him, curiosity battling with my instinct to run. We stumbled upon an old, abandoned gazebo, its once white paint now peeling and gray. It looked like it hadn't seen a soul in years. Jake grinned, his eyes sparkling with a strange excitement. He leaned against the railing, looking at me like he was about to share a secret. I stepped closer, drawn in by the intrigue. He began speaking again, this time about the people who had vanished in the area. His words flowed like a dark river, vivid and mesmerizing. But as he spoke, I felt an unease curling in my stomach. The way he described the missing people felt almost too passionate, like he was relishing the details. I tried to laugh it off, but my heart raced, and I glanced around, half expecting to see someone watching us from the shadows. The rain picked up, and I shivered, realizing that I needed to get out of there. I interrupted him, suggesting we head back to the cafe. The moment I said it, Jake's expression shifted. The playful glint in his eyes faded, replaced by something darker. He didn't move at first, just stood there, staring at me as if he was weighing my words. I felt a wave of fear wash over me as I turned to leave, but he grabbed my wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. I looked back at him, confusion and panic swirling in my mind. He was smiling again, but it didn't reach his eyes. It felt forced, like a mask slipping back into place. "Just a little longer," he said, his voice low and steady. I could tell he was trying to keep things light, but the way he said it sent chills down my spine. I pulled away, and for a second, I saw something flash in his eyes. Anger? Frustration? I couldn't tell, but it made my heart hammer in my chest. I broke into a run, tearing through the park, my feet splashing in the growing puddles. I could hear his footsteps behind me, and I pushed myself harder, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I didn't look back, didn't dare to. I just focused on the path ahead, on getting out of there. Finally, I burst onto the main road, panting and soaked to the bone. I glanced back, but there was no sign of him. I felt a mix of relief and dread, knowing that I had escaped whatever darkness he had been hiding. I hurried to my car, fumbling with the keys as my hand shook. As I drove away, my mind raced with questions. Who was Jake really? What had he been trying to do? Just as I thought I was safe, I received a notification on my phone. I glanced down, heart sinking as I saw a new message from him. "Did you really think you could run away from me? This isn't over yet." Panic exploded in my chest, and I threw my phone into the passenger seat. I gripped the steering wheel, eyes wide with fear. The rain continued to fall, heavy and relentless, just like the feeling of dread that settled over me. My mind was reeling as I sped down the road, realizing that this was only the beginning. I had always been a little skeptical about online dating, but when the pandemic hit, I found myself scrolling through Hinge like it was my lifeline. I created a profile, tossed in a few pictures of me at the beach, hiking, and laughing with friends, and soon enough, I was matching with people. Most conversations fizzled out before they even started, but then I matched with someone named Ethan. His profile was intriguing. He had this mysterious aura about him, like he was hiding something just beneath the surface. There was a certain intensity in his eyes that drew me in, and I found myself wanting to know more. We chatted for a couple of weeks, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was getting to know him on a deeper level. He was smart, witty, and had some dark humor that I found oddly charming. We talked about our favorite horror movies, and he told me about a haunted house he used to visit as a kid. I laughed it off at first. It was just harmless banter, right? But then he sent me a voice note, and the way he described it sent a chill down my spine. The excitement in his voice felt genuine, and I couldn't help but feel drawn to him. Eventually, Ethan suggested we meet in person. He wanted to take me to this secluded cabin in the woods, a place that would allow us to escape the chaos of the city. The idea felt exhilarating, a little dangerous, but I pushed the fear aside. I packed my bag, telling myself that it would be an adventure, that I was just being dramatic. I drove to the location he sent me, the sun setting behind me, casting eerie shadows on the winding road. As I pulled up to the cabin, nestled between towering trees, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. The place looked far more isolated than I had imagined, and there was an unsettling stillness in the air. I walked up the creaky steps, and the door swung open to reveal Ethan, his smile wide and inviting. He looked even better in person, with tousled hair and an easy charm that made me forget my earlier apprehensions. The inside of the cabin was cozy, filled with rustic furniture and a fireplace that crackled softly. I took a deep breath, the scent of pine and wood smoke filling my lungs. It felt like a scene from one of those horror movies we had joked about, and I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. We spent the evening talking, drinking wine, and sharing ghost stories. The atmosphere grew thicker as darkness descended outside. The shadows danced on the walls, and I found myself leaning closer to Ethan, feeling a magnetic pull. He talked about the cabin's history, how it was rumored to be haunted by a woman who had disappeared years ago. I scoffed at the tales, but the way he described the ghost made my heart race. I could see that he was captivated by the story, as if he had a personal connection to it. As the night wore on, I noticed something strange. Ethan would occasionally glance toward the windows, his expression shifting from excitement to something darker. I asked him if he was all right, but he brushed it off, chuckling nervously. I tried to dismiss my unease, but it lingered in the back of my mind. Around midnight, Ethan suggested we take a walk outside, and despite my instincts telling me to stay inside, I agreed. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the forest. We walked in silence, the crunch of leaves beneath our feet echoing in the stillness. I felt a chill in the air, and my skin prickled as we ventured deeper into the woods. The trees loomed over us like sentinels, their branches reaching out as if to ensnare us. Ethan led the way, his confidence unshaken, but I felt an increasing sense of dread. I could hear the rustling of leaves, the distant call of nocturnal creatures, and my heart raced with every step. I didn't want to admit it, but I felt trapped, as if we were being watched. I glanced back toward the cabin, its warm light flickering in the distance like a beacon, and suddenly, I wanted to run. Just as I was about to voice my discomfort, Ethan stopped and turned to me, his expression serious. He told me about a legend surrounding this area, how the woman who had vanished had been searching for something she never found. His voice dropped to a whisper, and I felt the hairs on my neck stand up. He mentioned how sometimes her spirit would wander the woods at night, searching for someone to take her place. My stomach churned at the thought, and I looked around, feeling like the shadows were closing in on us. Before I could respond, a rustling sound came from behind us, and I froze, my heart pounding. I turned to see a figure lurking in the darkness, just beyond the tree line. I couldn't make out any features, but the presence felt undeniably real. Panic surged through me, and I grabbed Ethan's arm, urging him to move back toward the cabin. He stood still, staring into the darkness, as if entranced. Suddenly, the figure stepped into the moonlight, revealing a woman with wild hair and hollow eyes. My breath caught in my throat as I realized she looked strikingly similar to the description Ethan had given of the ghost. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was paralyzed by fear. The woman's gaze locked onto mine, and an icy wave washed over me. I could feel her despair, her longing, and it sent shivers down my spine. Ethan turned to me, a smile creeping onto his face, but there was something off about it. He didn't seem afraid. He looked almost thrilled. I felt a surge of confusion and betrayal. Did he know about this? Was this all part of some sick game? As I took a step back, I felt the ground shift beneath me, and I stumbled. I looked up to see Ethan's expression change, his eyes darkening as he stepped closer to the woman. It hit me then, like a punch to the gut. Ethan wasn't just drawn to this place. He was connected to it, perhaps even complicit in its darkness. I turned to run, my instincts screaming at me to escape, but the woods felt alive, twisting and turning as if they were trying to trap me. I could hear Ethan's voice behind me, calling out, but it was no longer the comforting tone I had grown fond of. It was cold, almost mocking. Just as I thought I'd find my way back, I stumbled into a clearing, and I realized the truth. The cabin wasn't just a backdrop. It was a part of a cycle, a place where souls were bound, and Ethan was the keeper. He had lured me in, drawn me into this web of horror, and now I was just another lost soul, another story to add to the legend. In a moment of clarity, I turned and ran toward the cabin, desperate to escape the nightmarish reality. The wind howled around me, branches snapping in my wake, but I pushed through, fueled by adrenaline. I could hear Ethan's laughter echoing behind me, mingling with the woman's mournful cries. I reached the cabin, flinging open the door, and I slammed it shut, leaning against it, panting. The interior felt almost welcoming compared to the chaos outside, but I knew it was a facade. I glanced around for something, anything to defend myself with, but the walls felt like they were closing in. The fire crackled ominously, casting flickering shadows that danced in the corners of the room. Then I heard it, a soft knock at the door. My heart raced as I backed away. Not knowing what to expect, the knocking grew more insistent, and I could hear whispers, a chorus of voices calling my name. I pressed my back against the wall, my mind racing. Just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, the door creaked open, revealing Ethan standing there. But he was different. There was something hollow about his eyes, something terrifyingly empty. He stepped inside, and the temperature dropped. I felt the weight of the room shift, and I knew I was trapped. I glanced toward the windows, searching for an escape as the whispers grew louder, enveloping me. I realized then that it wasn't just Ethan who was pulling me in. It was the cabin itself, feeding off my fear, my desperation. I was caught in a nightmare of my own making, and the shadows were closing in fast. As I turned to face him, the last remnants of my hope faded, leaving only an overwhelming sense of dread.